There it is.
Got it.
You have it now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let me see what happened to all of you. Yeah, it's okay, there you all are. Okay, so you can see the screen. So tonight's agenda, we're going to learn about shopping for wine at retail stores. Then we're going to compare a left bank Bordeaux with a California cab, a newer style California cab side by side. And then we will learn about ordering wine in restaurants. So that's the agenda. We're going to talk about the glasses for tonight. We're going to use glass number 1. If you have a bigger, the bigger cab red wine style glass, that's what we're going to be using tonight. Ideally, I think I sent it in the email I sent out Monday. If you could taste them side by side, it'd be ideal, but it's not absolutely necessary. Hang on, let me just adjust this one other thing here. I've never run into technical issues before. Okay. Okay, and the ideal serving temperature is 62 to 64 degrees. I told folks that don't have a wine refrigerator, if they could throw the wine in their refrigerator for 10 or 15 minutes before we got started, it would help bring the temperature down a little bit. So I had suggested that. Okay, shopping for wine retail. First thing, when you look at wines, there's 2 different types of wine labels. There's an old world wine label, which tells you the producer. It tells you the vintage. It tells you the region. As most of you know, one of the big differences between wines in the United States and wines in Europe is a lot of especially in France and Italy, and in Spain, a lot of the wines are named after the region they're grown in. They're not named after the grapes. So you kind of have to know what's grown in that region to know what you're buying. In this case, this is a Montrachet. This is a Chardonnay from Burgundy. You kind of sort of have to know that before you get started. And it also tells you the alcohol level on the bottle. And just some basic regions. If you're buying a Chianti, the grape you're drinking is a Sangiovese. If you're buying a Rioja, it's a Tempranillo. If you're drinking a Bordeaux, it's always a blend. And if it's a left bank Bordeaux, it's going to be a blend of primarily Cabernet, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Sauvignon Blanc, and Semillon. Those are all the grapes from Bordeaux. Burgundy, it'll be a Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. A Beaujolais is going to be Gamay. A Barolo or Barbaresco is going to be Nebbiolo. If you buy Champagne, it's going to be a blend or one of, it's either going to be all Pinot Noir, all Chardonnay, but most of them you buy are a combination of Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir. And if you buy a Prosecco, it's actually a grape called Glera. So you're not buying the grape. You're not going after the grape name. When you buy a region, you have to know what's in it. With an American wine label or a New World wine label, any place other than Europe, you'll get the winery and the producer. You'll get the name of the wine. You'll also get the vintage. You also get a special designation. If it says something like reserve, it legally or illegally, it doesn't really mean anything. But a lot of winemakers will put reserve on their labels for some of their better wines or some of the wines with, from their better grapes and that sort of thing. If it comes from a particular vineyard, they will put the vineyard on there. And then they'll put the varietal. Unlike European wines, unlike the left bank Bordeaux, it's not going to say Cabernet, but an American wine will say Cabernet. And it'll also tell you the appellation in the region, and you'll also get the alcohol level there. If you get a blend of grapes, that's some interesting names. There's a classification of wines out there just called red blends or white blends. Red blends are red wines that were invented for people that don't like red wines. They're usually a little fruitier, a little sweeter. They're not as tannic, so they're sort of a gateway red wine for a lot of people. Things like Apothic, Menage a Trois, a lot of those types of grapes. Those are sort of the red blend category there. A lot of them will have a unique name, and some of these are pretty good wines, like Prisoner and Conundrum. Those are blends. They're usually a little higher level. They're usually a little better, but whenever you see a unique name like that, it is a blend of some kind. And if you ever see something that says Meritage on a wine label, that's a California wine that is made with Bordeaux grapes. So there's 5 red Bordeaux grapes. There's Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Melbac, and Petit Verdot. It'll be some combination of those 5 grapes. And if it says Meritage, there's a group of winemakers in California that, I don't know if they trademark their name, but they have to get approval to use the name Meritage. And what a Meritage is a California wine made with Bordeaux, in a Bordeaux blend style. Some other wine terms: dry means it's not sweet. Body is sort of the mouthfeel of the wine, as we've explained to a lot of folks. You can kind of look at body like you do the different types of milk. Skim milk is sort of like a light bodied, it has a light body. Half and half or whole milk is more full bodied. So it's the same sensation you get from milk in terms of the mouthfeel or the heaviness of the wine is what body translates to. Wines with with more alcohol tend to have more body because alcohol weighs more than wine. So it doesn't always mean that. There's other things that contribute to body as well. But usually wines with higher alcohol will taste more full-bodied because alcohol weighs more than water does. If something is crisp, it generally means it's tart. A cuvee, it's either a batch or a blend. It's a particular, blend of that year's wine. It may be a vintage, but they may make a special cuvee because it's a little different blend than some of the other wines that winemaker is making. That's what cuvee means. Rosso, tinto, if you see those terms, it means it's red. Bianco, blanc means it's white. Bouquet is the aroma in the wine. Buttery, it's usually goes with Chardonnay, and that usually means it's a white wine. It's a Chardonnay that's gone through malolactic fermentation, where malic, which is a tart acid, is converted to lactic acid, which gives that buttery sensation. If you've ever had Orville Redenbachen microwave popcorn, and it's buttery, you're not tasting butter. They put lactic acid on top of that popcorn to give you that buttery feel. Estate wine is a producer grows. If you see something that says estate wines, it means that producer grew the grapes and made the wine. They handled the production of that wine from planting the vine to bottling the wine. They handled it soup to nuts. Acidity is the sensation in the wine that makes your mouth water. It produces a tart, sharp character in the wine. Wines with great acidity go really well with foods that, do well with acidity. Acidity, you could look at acidity like vinegar. Vinegar goes great on salads. Vinegar goes great on some seafood and that sort of thing, especially with white wines with high acidity. Any place that vinegar would make the food taste better, a wine with high acidity will help the food taste better. Tannin makes your mouth pucker up. It's sort of like if you, like the sensation you get from black tea if you drink it without any milk in it or anything like that. The tannin in wines come from the skins, the seeds, the stem, and the barrel is what gives you the little bit bitter, puckery sensation in wine. Like we talked about before, reserve, if you see reserve on a wine bottle, It's usually a producer's better wines. Vintage is the year the grape used to make the wine were harvested. That's a question I get a lot. Is it the year it's bottled or is it the year that it's harvested? It's the year the grapes come from. Do vintages really matter? Especially in Europe where the weather is not consistent every year, and in areas like Bordeaux where they don't allow irrigation or anything. A lot of areas of Europe, they believe that the wine you drink should be the wine that God intended you to have, and God did not intend you to have irrigated wine and that sort of thing. Where in a lot of parts of the New World, they do allow irrigation and other measures where if you get inclement weather, you can mitigate for it. In France and Italy and Spain, especially, they don't always let you do that. So vintages are really important, especially for old world wines. They're important for new world wines as well, but not as important as they are for old world wines. Yeah, the difference in weather makes it. How can you tell if you have a good vintage? I can't memorize vintages. I have no recall. If you've ever seen a movie called Memento, its movie was out about 20 years ago. It was a guy that could only remember like 2 minutes. So he had to write everything on his arm to remind him of things. That guy has more recall than I do, so I cannot remember vintages. But I've downloaded something on my phone, the Wine Spectator Vintage Chart Plus app, which goes through different vintages of the world, different regions of the world. It lists the years and it gives a rating for that particular vintage. So you can tell if that particular vintage is a good one for that area that you're looking at. There's a number of other ones as well, but that's the one that I use. You can just go to the internet and search on vintage charts and you'll find a whole bunch of them. Okay, wine ratings. If you ever go to the store and say this wine has 92 points or this wine has 86 points, many wine critics use a 90-point scale. It was started by Robert Parker and Wine Advocate magazine. We're going to learn a little bit more about Robert Parker just prior to our wine tasting. If you see a number, if you see the picture here, the one wine has a 91, the other one has a 90. If you see some 95 plus, that means that particular critic has given it an, thinks it's amazing. 90 to 95 is outstanding. 80 to 89, very good. 85 to 87, good. 80 to 84, acceptable or drinkable. If it's 79 or less, that wine has issues. By the way, Laura gave me my official rating this morning. She gave me a 62, so I have to work on that a little bit. I definitely have issues. So that kind of, you're not always going to agree with that, but that gives you some context if you've never heard of the wine or you've never heard of the producer, whether it's going to be drinkable or not. It's just sort of like some insurance that you're getting. Wine Spectator, Wine Advocate, James Suckling, Decanter Magazine, Wine Enthusiast, and an app I use to keep track of all my wine called Cellar Tracker. They use a 90-point system. Apps like Vivino and Wine.com have their own system. The secret is just to find a service. If something has a 92 rating from Wine Spectator and you like it, and something else has an 80 rating from Wine Spectator and you don't like it, your palate is probably similar to Wine Spectator, so follow them. You're going to find a lot of times you won't agree with the ratings, but that's just a way of letting you know that some wines, the wine doesn't suck or stay away from this wine or whatever. That's how I use the ratings. Now, this is a lot of people ask me, is this wine worth it? So I came up, I'm looking for a skilled mathematician. I'd like to put this in a mathematical formula. I haven't figured out how to do it yet. But this is the Gasper the Wine Guy price quality theorem. The theorem is you start at 5. I test this out every time I buy something. I haven't been able to talk myself out of this yet. Starting at $5 a bottle, every time the price doubles, my perceived quality of the wine, goes down, the quality difference goes down 50%. By that, I mean, I think a $10 bottle is 50% better than a $5 bottle. A $20 bottle is 25% better than a $10 bottle. A $40 bottle is 12.5% better than a $20 bottle. $80 bottle, it goes down the higher you go up, and at some point it becomes meaningless. Does it mean that if you buy a $500 bottle of wine, it's not worth $500? No, people buy things for different reasons. And we'll talk about that right here. What goes into a price of a bottle of wine? The cost of the grapes, obviously. If I buy, a ton of grapes from the San Joaquin Valley in California, they're going to be not that expensive. I buy a ton of mountain fruit from Napa Valley, it's going to cost me a ton of money. So whoever makes the wine has to recover that cost in the price of the wine. The cost of the land. An acre of land in San Joaquin Valley is a lot less than an acre of land in Napa. They've got to get that out of the price of the wine that they charge you. The cost of the equipment, labor, and processing, the cost of bottling and shipping. These are all direct costs that you understand. But then you start getting into some soft factors. The reputation of the winemaker. If it's somebody that's been getting consistent 95-point scores for 10 years, you're going to pay more for that than if, I start a winery and it's my first year of production, because you don't know anything about me. So the reputation of the winemaker goes into the price of that bottle. Scarcity. If there's two wines, they're exactly as good as each other, but there's only one barrel made of this wine and there's 10,000 cases made of the other wine, you're going to pay more for the wine that there's only one barrel of because it's scarce. Not a lot of other people have it, and you're going to get some intrinsic value in knowing that you're one of the only people that possesses this particular bottle of wine. Market demand, the old, supply and demand thing. If there's a lot, if there's a wine gets a great write-up, people run out and buy it, the price is going to go up. But if there's a person that doesn't spend any money marketing and nobody knows about their wine, that it could be as good, but they're not going to be able to get as much money for it. And collectability, certain wines get better over time, certain wines have more value over time. If a lot of people buy wine as an investment, some of the best wines ever produced rarely get consumed because collectors just buy them. Just like if you've got a rare coin, you're not going to use it to buy a stick of Doublemint gum. You're probably going to save that in your collection. A lot of folks don't drink some of the best wine in the world. And it's a fond memory. If, I remember the first time I met Bonnie Bradford, we had a particular wine. That wine's going to be worth a lot more to me than a lot of other wines if you attach a fond memory to a particular wine. So there's a lot of things other than the wine itself. And snob appeal. Heck, I really enjoy, I enjoy being able to own something that, that somebody else doesn't enjoy and remind them that I have it and they don't. There's some intrinsic value in that. That goes into the price of a bottle of wine. Okay, what do you get at different price points? If you buy a wine that costs less than $5 a bottle, you get surplus grapes from bulk wine production areas. Grapes that have various degrees of ripeness. They can't afford to analyze whether these grapes are any good. They're just pick what's there and throw it in a bottle. Grapes are picked by machine, little nor sorting of grapes, lots of additives and flavoring agents. If you take grapes with various levels of ripeness and you want them to taste a certain way, you've got to add a lot of additives and flavoring to it to give you consistent flavor. So you're not tasting pure wine. There's a lot of There's a lot of things, a lot of manipulation goes in that wine to make it at least drinkable. If it's, says it's oak, it gets no exposure to real oak. An oak barrel on its own will add, a new oak barrel adds like $8 to a price of a bottle of wine just to pay for the barrel. So you're not going to get any real oak. You're going to get either oak flavoring, or they make these sawdust pellets that are put together with food glue that they throw in tanks and stuff like that to get that flavor. So let's say I don't care about any of that stuff. I still want something for less than $5 a bottle. My suggestion is to get some higher end box wines like Black Box or Boda Box. A 3-liter box, which is equivalent to 4 bottles, costs around $18. So you can get something drinkable. The quality is a lot better than 2 Buck Chuck or Pacific Peak or some other really cheap bottles of wines that are out there. And it'll last a month or so on your counter, or 6 weeks or so in your refrigerator. So if that's what you want to spend, that's my recommendation. If you want to get wines that cost between $5 and $15 a bottle, what you're getting there is better grapes from bulk wine production areas. Grapes are still picked by machine. Limited sorting of grapes. Probably have some additives and flavoring agents, but not to the extent that the really cheap wines do. If they want oak flavor, they'll use oak pellets, or they'll throw oak planks into big steel vats in order to give you some of the oak flavoring. Wines to buy. Wines don't need a lot of processing like Sauvignon Blanc. Any of you that went to the Sauvignon Blanc class, it's an easy grape to grow. They don't put it through malolactic fermentation. Very little of it is put in oak barrels. You can just squeeze it, ferment it, put it in a bottle. Some of the best cheap wines out there are Sauvignon Blancs. You can get some really good quality ones for not a lot of money. Wines from lesser known regions of France and Italy. There's some inexpensive Chiantis. There's some inexpensive Sangioveses. There's some inexpensive Montepulciano di Abruzzos that are pretty good. If you stay away from any of the main regions of France, like Bordeaux or Burgundy, you get something from southern France. You can get some decent bottles, especially rosés. Wines from lower cost countries like Spain, Bulgaria, Romania, Argentina, and Chile. You can get some decent wines for less than $15 from them. Australian Reds and German Rieslings, you can get some decent ones in that price range. And if you want to get something American, Washington State makes some really good mass market wines from growers like Chateau Ste. Michelle and Columbia Crest. They're not going to be the best wines you ever tasted, but for that price point, they're good. Any of you that go to the October tasting, we're going to do really good lower cost wines from Washington State, and there's a brand there called Wine of Substance. They make some great wines for not a lot of money. If some red blends in that price point are pretty good, and if you want some bubbly, some basic Prosecco and basic Cava are pretty good in that price range. And if you want a red Zinfandel, you can look to Amador County or Lodi in California in that price range. Wines that cost $15 to $30 a bottle. There's some of the best grapes from second tier growing areas, surplus grapes from top level growing areas. Grapes are picked by machine, depending on the terrain. If it's a hilly area, they'll be picked by hand. Bad grapes and non-grape material are sorted out. There's a term in winemaking called MOG, M-O-G. It stands for matter other than grapes that get in the wine. That's, stems, bugs, other stuff that gets in the wine. That stuff's all sorted out. Very limited flavor additives and flavoring agents. Planks, neutral barrels, and limited use of new oak barrels. Wines to buy in this price range, I look for wines from Monterey County in California. Entry-level French wines like Côte d'Aron. You can get some outstanding, some really good Rhone wines in this price range. Chianti, Barbera, Pinot Grigio, Montepulciano, Valpolicella, Nebbiolo from Italy. Entry-level Sonoma, Santa Barbara County wines, good quality Prosecco, and higher quality bottlings from the areas previously mentioned. Wines that cost from $30 to $60 a bottle. Grapes from quality growing areas, combination of hand and machine picking. Even some of the best Bordeaux's, if the land is flat and the grapes ripen evenly, are picked by machine. Grapes are sorted. You're not going to get any bad grapes in there. Hardly any additives or flavoring agents, only new and neutral barrels used. This is for red wines. Wines to buy. Wines from Paso Robles, Sonoma, and entry-level Napa. Willamette in Oregon. I just got back from Willamette. Anybody wants to hear about it, we could talk about it when we're over. Barolo, Brunello, Barbaresco, Amarone from Italy. Champagne and Bordeaux from France. Higher quality bottlings from areas previously mentioned. And if you want wines that cost $60 plus, there's grapes from the top 5% of growing areas, mostly hand picking. Grapes are sorted and graded with only the top grapes used. Other than limited use of sulfites, no additives are used. Significant percentage of new barrels, wines to buy. By my favorite category of wines in the world, Super Tuscans from Italy. Wines from the top areas of Burgundy. Low production wines, rock star winemakers. If there's a really famous winemaker, you may enjoy buying some of their wines. Wines you want to collect and possibly use as an investment. Wines that have a story to tell or which you have an emotional connections. Sometimes it's worth it if you were at a place or it reminds you of your wedding day or the day you got divorced or some other significant day in your life. You know, that you may be worth that to you to spend that much money. And higher quality bottlings from areas previously mentioned. Here's some random stuff before we get into the tasting portion of it. Top Shelf actually has a meeting, if you've ever heard of the term top shelf. Most wine stores have their most expensive wines on the top shelf and their least expensive wines on the bottom shelf. So that does have a meeting. At Total Wine, if a price ends in a 7, it is a loss leader. Sometimes they lose money on selling you that wine. The purpose of that is to get you into the store so that people like me can show you other wines to buy to bring that transaction into profitability. If you find something you like at Costco, get it while you can, because much of what they carry are special deals and overstock. I think I sent some of you a note. Costco is cutting back on their quality wine, and it's breaking my heart because I could always find some interesting things there for not a lot of money, and they're cutting back on that a little bit. And screw tops. This is something that everybody should know. Screw tops are better than corks for wines that don't need to age, which is about 80% of the wines that are out there. If you get a Sauvignon Blanc, most Zinfandels, and it comes in a screw top, don't let that turn you off, because that wine's as good as it's going to get. And if a wine, when they bottle it, is as good as it's going to get, there's no reason to risk cork tank or taint or you know, any air getting in the bottle. Don't let the screw. More and more better wines, higher quality wines are starting to use screw tops, so don't let that put you off. So before we get started with the tasting, let's have a little background. Who's heard of raise your hand if you've heard of the Judgment of Paris. Okay, Judgment of Paris. Until at least the late 1970s, Left Bank Bordeaux was considered the best expression of Cabernet in the world. In the 1976 Judgment of Paris, it was held where a Napa Valley Stag's Leap Cellars Cabernet was judged superior to the best Cabernets produced in France. Stag's Leap Cellars was produced in a style similar to Bordeaux in that it had an alcohol level below 14%, Often they produced wines with alcohol less than 13%. It had grippier, which meant more bitter tannins. It was a balance of earth and fruit and had balanced oak. The oak was integrated into the wine. You didn't really hit you in the face or anything like that. California, after the Judgment of Paris, produced Cabernet primarily in the Bordeaux style for the next 20 to 25 years. And they were doing a good job of it. And the Judgment of Paris was depicted in the movie Bottle Shock. I don't know if anybody saw that movie. It's got to be out there on Netflix or somewhere. Although the focus of that movie was not Stag Leap Cellars, it was on Chateau Montelena, whose Chardonnay also beat the French wines that year. So, and they threw a little love story in there and a little other drama, and it was an okay movie. And then, ba-ba-boom, the Parkerization of wine occurred. And there he is right there. There's Robert Parker. We talked about his 90-point scale earlier. In 1976, Robert Parker began publishing The Wine Advocate, the first magazine that looked at wine from a consumer's viewpoint. Prior to that, it was made for restaurateurs, sommeliers, wine collectors. That's where all the publications were for. But Robert Parker was the first one to create a publication for the common man. He invented the 100-point grading systems for wine. By the end of the century, by the end of the 1990s, a good or bad score from Wine Advocate could really impact a winery's bottom line. It was some wineries, if they got a good score, they saw millions of dollars of increased revenue, the bigger ones. Wine Advocate tended to give higher scores to Cabernets that were more fruity than earthy, had rounder, which means softer, less bitter tannins. You still had tannins, but they didn't make your mouth pucker up. They had a higher percentage of new oak, where sometimes when you tasted the wine, you really knew it was new oak. The oak kind of overtook a lot of it. It had higher alcohol, and they did not need to age it as long. So they tended to give higher scores. So after the turn of the centuries, most high-end Cabernet producers in California started changing the way they made wine. Instead of making it in their Bordeaux style, they started to make it in the fruit-forward, higher alcohol, oaky style that Robert Parker liked, so that they could get high scores from Robert Parker. And this is a term that's been used in the wine industry. This is called the Parkerization of California wines. That's why one of my least, I'm a little biased here, one of my least favorite places to go wine tasting is Napa, because you go to every place and a lot of them are really fruity, really oaky, and I have a hard time telling what I'm drinking or the difference of it, because they really want that fruit forward, oaky style, high alcohol style. So that's what changed. I've done a wine tasting where I've tasted the same brand of wine. It was actually Caymus from the mid to late 90s. I forgot the exact years, and maybe 2006, and you would not know they were the same wine. They made the corporate decision to change the way that they made wine. So that explains the change in wine. Bordeaux, we're going to do a deep dive into Bordeaux next month. But here is Bordeaux. It sits in southwestern France. It looks like a river, but it's actually an estuary because the water comes in from the ocean. Anything to the left of the river is grown in a clay soil, in gravel soil, which reflects light, which makes it warmer, which makes it really good to grow wines that need a lot of ripening, like Cabernet. On the right bank, it's more of a clay soil, and that's better for growing things like Merlot. That's why if you ever hear the term left bank Bordeaux, they're talking about something that's primarily Cabernet. If you hear the term right bank Bordeaux, they're talking about something that's primarily Merlot. Remember, all Bordeaux's are blends. And here's the little diagram. Here's the left bank of Bordeaux. You've got four main villages. You've got Saint Estèphe, Pauillac, Saint Julien, and Margot. Those are the most expensive prime areas. And then you've got the Medoc and the Haut Medoc. The whole area is known as the Medoc generically, but the wine we're going to have is from the Haut Medoc. It's not from one of the prime villages. It's from one of the areas adjacent to them. And then the wine we're having, I couldn't get a detailed spec sheet on it. If I don't know if everybody, how many of you raise your hand if you got the La Tonnelle? If you're able to get that. It's hard, especially if you're not near a total wine, to get this, but that's why we talked about getting some from the Haut Medoc. It's 60% Cabernet, 35% Merlot, 5% of a wine called Petit Verdot, which is a big, ripe, dark fruit. It gives a lot of structure to Bordeaux wine, and it's only 13.5% alcohol. The California wine we're having is from Sonoma. It's from the Alexander Valley. If you look at Sonoma, they're known for, Chardonnay, they're known for Pinot Noir, they're known for Zinfandel. Their Cabernets come primarily from two areas, from Alexander Valley and Knights Valley. If you notice, it's inland, so it's a little warmer, so they get to ripen a little more. And you'll see its proximity. Napa's right there. It's right next door to Napa. The wine we're having is from Alexander Valley. I did not want this to be an expensive tasting, and that's why we stuck to Sonoma for it. So that's where the wine you get comes from. It's made by Louis Martini. It was founded in 1922 during Prohibition to make sacramental wine and concentrate for winemaking. Even during Prohibition, they let the more religious among us have a little bit of wine for sacramental purposes. So it's an amazing how many people converted during the Depression and that sort of thing. But that's when they got their start. Built its first winery in 1933. He formed the Napa Valley Vintners Association in 1943 to improve the quality and reputation of Napa Valley wines. His son, Louis P., took over the winery in 1954. In 1970s, they were among the first wineries to bottle Merlot. Merlot wasn't big until the 70s. In 2002, the winery was purchased by Gallo. His son was introduced into the Vintners Hall of Fame as a pioneer. A Martini Cabernet was given 100 points by Robert Parker in 2017, so they made a lot of money that year. And just some facts on it before we start drinking it. It's 95% Cabernet Sauvignon and 5% Petit Syrah. Petit Syrah is going to give it a little more fruitiness. It's going to soften it up a little bit, give it some color. It's got 15% alcohol, which is 1.5% higher than the Bordeaux, and definitely not in the Bordeaux style. It's got a pH level. It's got moderate acidity. It's got 3.69 pH, which is moderate. One thing that's interesting about this wine, it's got a residual sugar of 7 grams per liter. Anything under 10 is considered dry, but this is just barely dry. The American palate, wines that are made for the American market, because we have sweet tooths, tend to have a little more residual sugar in them. And this is an example. It's still a dry wine, but just barely. In its Robert Parker review in April 2020, it got 88 points, as the review stated. Deep garnet purple colored, the 2017 Cabernet Sauvignon Alexander Valley features bold notes of warm cassis, blackberry pie, and red currant jelly with touches of bay leaves, mossy dark tree bark, menthol plus a hint of crushed rocks. Medium to full body, the palate has a firm, rugged texture and oodles of freshness, lifting up the generous fruit to a long finish. And there was just over 16,000 cases of this wine produced. So those are most of you are grizzled veterans. You know, you look at the wine, you swirl it to bring out the aromas. You sniff because there's a lot of things that you get from the aromas that you don't get from the palate. And then you sip, not guzzle the wine, swish it around your tongue, let it hit all of your flavor receptors so you can get all the flavor out of it. And with that, let's taste, and I will stop sharing. Okay. Some of you have cheated and started drinking early. I know why some people don't display themselves, so I can't catch them do that. So I had some of that with dinner. There's a little of that. And here's a little of this. So what I got with the Bordeaux, if you take a look at the two colors, we were talking a little bit about that prior. You can tell right off the bat which one is the Bordeaux, because if you look at the Alexander Valley, it's a much deeper, richer color. The Bordeaux's, you know, it's got a deep color, but it's a little bit translucent in different areas and such. When you sniff it, I get much riper fruit out of the Alexander Valley than I'm getting out of the Bordeaux. I get a little more vegetal qualities out of the Bordeaux. When I taste it, I get a balance. I get a little more acidity on the Bordeaux than I get out of the Alexander Valley, the Martini. Martini, I get tannins. I get a lot of tannin on the finish, but they're softer. I get riper fruit, and I can really taste the alcohol. I can really feel the alcohol on the palate. What are some of your impressions of the two as you compare the two? Unmute. You can feel free to unmute yourself.
I think the Cabernet tastes sweeter.
Yeah, it's got, like I mentioned, it's got 7 grams per liter of residual sugar in it. So you're gonna, that's typical of the Parkerized Cabernets and that sort of thing. They'll have a little more residual sugar. It's a little softer on the palate and that sort of thing.
I like the Bordeaux better though, just personally.
Me too. It's the complexity of the Bordeaux is more pleasing.
There's a lot more going on. You taste a lot of fruit. I agree with you. I get some wet stone. I get some red fruit. I get a lot of acidity. Ooh.
Yeah. And we have a bunch of people here on the conference one, and Bonnie has a comment she wanted to make.
Hey Gasper, to me the Cab is better as a cocktail wine and eating it with cheese. And for a dinner wine, I think that the Bordeaux would be better.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a rule of thumb that a lot of people use is if you want a wine with food, look to the old world, because a lot of old world wines were developed to accompany food, because hundreds of years ago, the water wasn't safe to drink, but through fermenting, through making wine, the fermentation that goes through there to make beer and other things that made the water safe, or made liquid safe to drink. So they started developing wines that went with the foods of the area. So they're more food wines, where I agree with you. If you're just sitting around, you know, sipping wine, I think a wine with softer tannins and that sort of thing like that, the Alexander might be preferable.
So a lot of cheese here, and I've tried most of the cheese with both wines. Sorry, we didn't wait. And especially the cheddars that we have, most of the cheeses that we have, I like them better with the martini than I do with the French one. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
But you still have a lot of tannin, which goes good with the cheese and the martini, but it's not as, when they say balanced with the Bordeaux, at least in my opinion, you can taste the fruit, you can taste the tannin, you can taste the acidity, and you can taste like the whetstone and other characteristics. Where on first sip with the Alexander Valley, I taste a lot of fruit, a bit of oak, and that sort of covers up everything. And then at the end, I get a little burst of tannin with the martini.
What was the character of the wine that you compared to like milk, skim milk, and whole milk?
That's body.
Okay, yeah, because the body on the Bordeaux is thinner,
Right.
but it's smoother. It has a nice feel in the mouth.
Right. If you drink them both, put them on your palate, I think, to your point, I think the Alexander Valley is going to feel a little heavier. And that's the body aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's because it's got 1.5% more alcohol. So that's going to feel a little heavier.
Gasper, my feeling about the two wines is the Bordeaux is, I would describe, more savory, and whereas the Alexander Valley is, again, fruity, as you said.
It is, and there's probably a reasonable amount of acidity in there, but you really don't taste it. So when they talk about balance, you can like taste every different, you can taste the multiple aspects of wines. And although I think it's very tasty, I kind of think the fruit and the alcohol in the Alexander Valley kind of step in front of all the other aspects of it. I'm not saying it's bad, it's just not as balanced as I think the Bordeaux is. But I could be wrong. Whatever you think is the right thing. No two palates are the same.
Yes, for our little experiment here, by opening both an older Bordeaux and an older California Cabernet, was kind of interesting because both of the older ones initially were really kind of closed, and I thought, oh, we waited too long. But both of those have come around, so that gives us hope also and faith in the younger Bordeaux and Burgundy, and Cabernet that we tasted tonight too. It'll be interesting to see how they last down the road.
So, Gasper, how long would you age either of these bottles? Is it 2017 in the Martini the right year to be drinking it? Would you age it any more than that?
Both of these ones probably would have started drinking it, and ideally, another 5 years for the Martini and 8 to 10 years for the Bordeaux. But at this price point, just buy them and drink them and that sort of thing. These aren't usually wines less than $40 or whatever. They're just made to enjoy when you buy them. Some of them will age well. I think that because of the alcohol in the Martini, I think that will age well. And because of the tannins in the Bordeaux, I think that'll age well as well. And the tannins in the Martini as well. The thing is, the reason you used to age a lot of the older Bordeaux's is to soften some of those bitter tannins. But if a wine comes out of the starting gate already soft, already fruity, there's not as much of a reason to do that. Mm-hmm. That's why I did a Camus teleconference tasting at Total Wine, and they're starting to say, that one of their selling points is their wines you can drink when they're young. So, because those wines are already softer out of the gate, they don't really need to age as long, if that makes any sense.
I guess with the higher alcohol wines, and you said you get it in the flavor, I actually get it in my eyes.
In your eyes?
Yeah. There's like a,
You shouldn't miss the mouth. I mean,
when you start getting in the upper alcohol levels, I get like a little burn. I love this thing.
I think these are lovely wines though, but this is a higher price point usually than I'm buying too.
no, at dinner, I had a glass of the
Like what?
martini, and the fact that I'm grossly overweight has part to do with it. I started really sweating. So, and that's another way it manifests. But you can taste that there's a couple ways you can usually feel the alcohol in the back of your throat and that sort of thing. And I can really feel that. Any other questions on the tasting? Any other observations?
Let me ask you this with the Sonoma cab. Typically I'd buy a Napa cab. I mean, I like this. And this price point, is this the right price point then to get a decent cab from Sonoma?
Yeah, I want to drink a young cab. I want a California style. I like Alexander Valley cabs, because you can get decent ones for around $30, a little more, a little less, and you don't have to age them. They're generally, this one's got a little more alcohol, that's why I picked this one up, but they're generally a little less alcohol, and they're not the big oak and fruit bombs sometimes you get. I find if you can get some Napa cabs around $30, I don't think they're as balanced or as good as an Alexander Valley cab around the same price. You start getting around $40, $50, that's when the Napa cabs start getting better.
Right. No.
So, so that I can afford to take Bonnie to dinner, I have to
I didn't know.
economize on my wine other nights so that I can spoil her.
Bonnie Bradford, she's from Tucson. She's from Newfoundland.
Bonnie and I are having dinner tomorrow night.
Is she on there?
Yeah, right there. They're funny.
That's
Any
you.
other thoughts?
Which one?
Bonnie's right there. In that there.
Any other thoughts before we move on? Go ahead.
Not really.
Okay. In that case, I will mute everybody. And then I will start sharing. And hopefully it doesn't blow up on me last time I started sharing. Okay, can everybody see? Can everybody see people tasting wine and enjoying themselves? Okay, beautiful.
Yes.
Okay. Just if you're interested, this is a generalization. If you like one style over the other, let me get rid of this. Okay. If you like red fruit flavors, grip your tannins later, but if you like wines that are more like the Bordeaux, look to Bordeaux. What a shocker. Chile, Northern Italy, a lot of the wine, but some Washington State wines in Western Australia, you'll get that sort of a flavor profile. If you want something that's more fruit forward, high alcohol, more body, ripe tannin, look to California, Southern Australia, Argentina, South Africa, and Spain, if you get Cabernets out of those areas. So those are generalizations. You'll find winemakers that make them in both styles, but you'll have decent odds of getting what you want if you don't know that much about the producer. Okay, now we're going to talk about ordering wine in restaurants. Ordering wine in restaurants. In terms of how much should you pay, 100% markup from retail is reasonable. They've got to pay the waiter. They got to pay for the glasses. They got to pay for the linens. They got to print the sheets. So, some people freak out when they see, it costs that much, but they're offering you a service, and that service is worth something. The price, if you buy a glass of wine, if you at a restaurant, it should be about 50% of the price of a bottle. Usually you should get 5 glasses of wine out of a bottle. And the price of a glass is about half of what you'd expect for the bottle if you went to the store to buy it. Restaurants hope, this is the secret, hope you spend your way out of not knowing what to pick. That's the secret. So we're going to learn a little bit about that tonight. Remember, the cheapest wine is always not the best value. And we're going to do a range of restaurants here, like Uncle Sal's restaurant in Scottsdale. You can get a less expensive Prosecco, Monato Prosecco. It's $30. It's 14% retail. It's 114% markup. And we're talking value. We're not talking price here. You can get a Pierre Jouet Grand Cru Brut Champagne at $69. It's only $59. You're only paying a 17% markup. So remember, the cheapest wine is not always the best value. You're paying a higher multiple on some of the cheaper stuff. Generally, if you've heard of it, you're going to pay more for it because that's what people tend to lean on. Buca di Beppo. A Cavit Pinot Noir is $25, $10 retail. It's 150% markup. You can get a La Crema Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir. It's $40, $22 retail. It's only an 82% markup. You also should stay away from high-end mass market wines. We talked about 3 of the best example of high-end mass market wines at Dominic's. Veuve Clicquot Yellow, which is the prototypical mass market high-end champagne. It's $128. It's $60 retail. It's 113% markup. But one of my favorite sparkling wines in the world, a Ruinart Blanc de Blanc, is $138, $10 more, but it's $90 retail. It's only a 53% markup. So generally, if you've heard of it and if everybody's buying it, it'll be more expensive. This is probably the poster child for high-end mass market wines, a Rumbauer Chardonnay Carneros. It's $84, $37 retail, and it's 107% markup. Or you can get $84, 127% markup. You can get a Frank Family Vineyards Carneros. Chardonnay is one of the categories it's tough to get deals in. It's only 107% markup, and you're probably getting a much better wine as well. Fleming's Caymus, which is the other poster child of high-end mass market wines. It's $180, $80 retail. It's 125% markup. But if you get another great wine at J. Davies Napa, is also $180, but its retail price is $119. It's only a 51% markup. So generally, if you've heard of it, they're going to charge you more for it. Instead of Napa and Sonoma, especially at restaurants, consider Paso and Washington for your Cabernets. Going back to Uncle Sal's, a Franciscan cab, which is a mediocre cab from Napa. They want $39, $15 retail, 160% markup. You can get a Niner Cabernet Bouchac. It's only a 35% markup. A Brown Family Vineyards. If you've never had Brown Family, they make some really decent wines at reasonable prices. It's only a 41% markup. Elements in Paradise Valley. Average Napa Sonoma markup is 108%. The average Paso Robles markup is 76%. So if you're looking at values at restaurants, that's right. Another tip is stay away from gas station wine. If you can pick it up at your Circle K or your 7-Eleven, don't buy it at your restaurant. At Buca di Beppo, Barefoot Cellar Chardonnay, it's 186% markup. Kendall Jackson Vintners Reserve Chardonnay, 191% markup. Claude de Beau Chardonnay, 190% markup. You can get a Sonoma Couture Russian River Valley Rasmus, which is a nice bottle of Chardonnay. It's only an 82% markup. So stay away from wines you can get at the Circle K. There's this author, I'll talk a little bit about this book in a minute. This is like the first wine book I ever read. And inside this book, she does this restaurant bill of rights. You go to a restaurant, you have the right to enjoy your own taste. Don't let anybody intimidating you into drinking something you don't like or making you think that what you're buying isn't the right thing. You have the right to know nothing and get help. Your heart surgeon doesn't expect you to know anything about the cardiovascular system when you go in for heart surgery. Your sommelier should not expect you to know anything about wine. They ought to service you and respect you and not make you feel bad about stuff. You have a right to be spoken to in a language you can understand. Going from a computer field into dealing with wine people, there's a lot of similarities. We all like to use words in both of my lives that others couldn't understand to make me feel more important and that sort of thing. Don't put up with that crap. You can call them out on it. Most people live rich, full, balanced lives that have nothing to do with wine. You can't expect them to know anything about wine. And you should have people respect that. You have right to have wine in restaurants that matches the food. You have the right to have someone at the restaurant who can talk about the wine and knows the menu. You're paying a premium for that wine. Part of the reason you're doing that is because you can get some consultation, somebody that knows something. If they want to charge you twice of what a bottle will cost you at Total Wine or a different wine store, you have the right to expect somebody knows something about it and they know the foods that it goes with it. You have a right to decent glassware. We talked about that the most important part of a glass of wine is to have the lip that's narrower than the body of the glass. You go to glasses and they're all like etched and, you know, they reach out, or they're little jelly glasses or something. You have the right, if you're going to pay a premium, to have different glassware is what her point is. Right to be served wine at the correct temperature. Right to send flawed wine back without a fight. Laura and I have ordered wine before. The stuff has been horrible. It's obviously corked or something else wrong, and the waiter starts arguing with me. No, if you don't like the wine, send it back. They can probably get a credit for it anyway. Oh, this came out of this book, Drink This. This book isn't in print. It hasn't been in print for 10 years. But it's great. It's real simple language. It goes through basic wine types. It's a great book. You can pick it up for $5 on eBay, maybe pay a little shipping or something like that. Look for it. If you've not read a wine book, it's a very quick read. You know, you'll be 27% smarter when you're done reading it, because it really does a good job of explaining wine to people that, you know, have other important things in their life to do that. So that's where this particular Bill of Rights came from. And then we go into the whole wine presentation ritual. It freaks a lot of people out. It's not that complicated. First thing you do when they present the wine to you, you inspect the label to make sure it's the right producer, style, and vintage. A lot of times, if you look at a wine list, they'll have a vintage, but when they bring you the bottle, it'll be a different vintage. A lot of times I'm not smart enough to know the difference, but sometimes I want to go for a particular vintage. And often, especially with old world wines, there's different pricing on different vintages. A 2016 might be worth $20 more than a 2017 or something. Make sure that matches what you thought you were ordering. And if the vintage is wrong or the bottle is wrong, tell them before they open up the bottle. It's just a nice, courteous thing to do. If they open it up and then you tell them it's the wrong wine. And then when they give you the cork, inspect it to make sure it's not soaked, crumbly, or has color running all the way up to the side. If you open up a bottle of red wine and you see a streak of purple going up the whole side of the cork, it generally means there's something wrong with the cork and they've let some air into the bottle. And there's probably something wrong with it. Point that out before you taste it. Inspect the wine against the white background after the tasting pour to make sure nothing unexpected is floating around in the well. There's nothing off-putting about the experience. And then taste the wine to make sure it's acceptable. Like I said before, if the wine, if the server says it's supposed to taste that way, you're still within your rights to ask for the bottle to be replaced. Most likely the restaurant will get a refund from their distributor anyway, so they're not really losing any money on it. Don't be intimidated by your waiter or your sommelier. A few other tips. Look at the wine list before you order food. It saves a lot of time. I generally do the opposite. I figure out what wine I want to drink and then I figure out what I want to eat, but I'm a little weird that way. Look to South America, South Africa, Australia, and less well-known regions if you're looking for value. Look for grape varieties you may not be familiar with. Ask your server or sommelier. They're your consultant. They may turn you on to a wine that they absolutely love. A lot of nicer restaurants, the wine would not be on their list. A wine that you've never heard of will not be on their list unless somebody at the restaurant really liked it. So they may, they may be able to turn you on to something you would have never otherwise tried. Here's something, I've read an article where this may not be as true as it used to be, but never buy the second cheapest wine on the menu. I took Laura out for our first date and I couldn't afford it, but I didn't want to seem like a cheapskate. So I ordered the second cheapest wine instead of the cheapest wine. People know that that's a human tendency, and that may be one of the worst values on the menu. So that's an old rule, is never order the second cheapest bottle of wine on the menu. If you're like me and you have no shame, you look at the wine list, I'll take out my app, I'll look at what the retail price of the wine is and know if I'm getting hosed or not. I've got no pride. That's something you can do to tell if you're getting a good value or not. If you order a glass of wine, I'm old, just like the old Seinfeld episode, Laura and I always go to the early bird to get the best discounts and stuff like that. But if you order a glass of wine soon after the restaurant opens, make sure that they have some sort of a wine preservation system like a Coravin that infuses gas into the wine to help preserve it. If they just have the bottles lined up on the bar with corks in them from the night before, that wine is probably not going to taste that good. So if you order wine by the glass, you're there within the first hour or so that the restaurant opens, make sure that they use a Coravin or something. This is something I've learned. We've taken quite a few cruises, and if they cater to Americans, this is where you definitely have to stay away from. If you've heard of it, don't buy it. I was doing some price comparisons, and I was getting some French Burgundies at 30 to 40% above retail price. Whereas if you ordered a bottle of what was it, like if you ordered a 7 Deadly Zins or something like that, you were paying 400 to 500% what you'd normally pay. You do some research. Most Americans don't know much. They haven't attended this class like you have, so they're not the geniuses that you are all now. You'll get some better values if you stick with some of the old world stuff, or at least some American wines that others may never have heard of. And a rule is sometimes I'll look at a menu, I'll say, Jesus, I'm not paying this, but I want to have a glass of wine. So I'll always look to the cheapest Côte d'Aron if I want a red, Australian Shiraz, or an Australian Cabernet. And they're usually the most reasonable, and I'm almost never disappointed. Some questions and chat. Let me stop sharing here. Okay, thoughts, questions?
It's bottom wherever she is. Yeah, there I am. Are restaurants in Phoenix and Scottsdale letting you bring in wine and charging you a corkage?
A couple places are. There's a couple places. There's a place called Basil and Garlic, a little Italian place that does it. And place Bonnie, I, and Laura are going on Monday night called Giuseppe's. They do it. There's a limited number of places. There's a restaurant next to AZ Wines. I don't know about Tucson. Those are the 3 places around Phoenix that I know do it.
What do you consider an acceptable corkage amount?
I'd say, depending if it's a really nice restaurant,
$25.
$25, $30. If it's sort of a hole in the wall,
Really, for one bottle?
10, yeah, 10 or 15 bucks or something like that. I mean, they're opening it for you. You're not buying, you know, whatever they're selling to drink. They're pouring it for you. I mean, there's a service they're providing and they need to be compensated for it. They're not charities. That's my view of it. Other people may have a different.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you.
does it make sense to order a bottle of wine rather than a glass if it's a good bottle and you can take it home from the restaurant?
Yeah, I think ounce per ounce, I think it's a better value to buy the wine. And if you're gonna like it and take it home, you can do that. Yeah, I very rarely order wine by the glass.
I'm gonna have 2 glasses of top of the bar.
Because I like looking at the wine list and it's just sort of, I like the whole experience. Although I like cork wines better at restaurants. We talked about the screw caps earlier. It's not the same when they go to your table as opposed to go through the whole opening the cork thing. You feel like it's a cooler experience that way.
It's true. It's true. Well,
What other questions or thoughts?
By the way, Gasper, I've had multiple people from Tucson tell me that they would have paid the money to come to your live tasting at least.
They would?
Yes. Yes.
Well, they have an opportunity.
So you have to schedule one for us.
Oh, they would have, oh, the one in Tucson at Feast?
Yeah.
I think
I'll talk to you about that tomorrow a little more. I got some ideas.
Everybody's anxious to see you here live and in person.
It's gonna be a letdown, I'm telling you. I'm not the, I don't have the animal magnetism in person I have over Zoom, so.
Well, let us be the judge of that.
Hey, Gasper,
Yeah,
do you know, has Robert Parker ever made any comments on his Parkerization of Cabernets and as far as his intentionality for doing it?
they claim that they didn't, and I read an article this week, not to get too deep into the woods, where there's a lot of pushback against Parkerization. There's some sort of like, a lot of people are shunning winemakers that do that. The counterpoint is, if people didn't like it, the people wouldn't make it. They're making these wines. People like them. People are drinking them. And who are all of the wine snobs that are telling people what to drink? So there's two schools of thought on that. He claims he isn't. He just, he thinks those are the wines that people like, and that's why he rates them higher. And he's very, given the sales of those wines and what people are willing to pay for, especially Napa wines, he's probably right. I'm not saying anything's right or wrong. I'm just talking about a moment in history when the way they made Cabernets in California changed. I'm not saying it's for the good or for the bad.
Right. Thank you.
Where did you hear that Costco wasn't going to be offering any higher end wines anymore?
I don't know, but I always used to like going there and looking around, and I just pick up a couple bottles of things I never heard of, or some wines that were too good to be true, given the price and where they were from. But I walked in there, and where they used to have my little wood cases of the better wines, there was now like bags of buns and things like that. And then now there was like a bunch of pallets on wines. There was a lot of Prisoner, a lot of some of the mass market wines we were talking about. They have lots of those, and the little quirky wines that I like to try, they didn't have any. So I went to the Costco website, I made a comment, and lo and behold, one of the reasons Costco is just so successful, other than the fact that they're killing their wine department, I actually got a call from the store manager of my local Costco to talk to me about it.
Wow.
And he said he was fighting it too. He's getting all kinds of complaints. He was very, very upfront with me. He said last count there was 40 SKUs, which is 40 types of wine that they used to carry that they didn't carry anymore. So
wow.
I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I mean,
No, that's fine. What about, I remember I haven't been at Costco for a while, but the Kirkland brand, they had several tiers.
Oh, yeah. They made a Kirkland Jagonis that would make me tear up. It was so good. And it was like $14 or something like that. And I don't see it anymore.
Yeah, they had a Kirkland Sancerre.
Yeah.
I got 6 bottles and I never saw it again.
Yeah, I would like to do, one of the things I was thinking of doing is doing a Costco tasting, but given everybody's spread all over the place, every Costco carries something different. It's virtually impossible to get everybody to do that. So I can't do that. Any other questions or thoughts or anything? Is this any?
Yeah, Gasper, I have a question. During your slides, you mentioned that for the lower priced wines, that there's a lot of additives and flavorings that can be added. And I'm wondering if, at least for the California wines, is there any regulation about that? Do they have to list, or is anything like that listed on the bottle when they add?
No, that's one of the things I don't understand. You buy a bottle of LaCroix water, they have to put the nutrition little thing on the back. For some reason, they don't do that for wine. I don't understand why they don't do that. No, as far as I know, I could be wrong. There's probably some requirements where you have to be below certain levels of certain chemicals and stuff, but
Really weird that they wouldn't have.
no, but you got to think about it. You get a bottle of $2 Chuck. What is it now? It's a 3 or 4 bottle Chuck. I mean, you got to pay for the bottle. You got to pay for the thing. You can't have good stuff. You can't do a lot of quality control. So the only way they can control the taste is by adding stuff to the wine to make it taste different.
We could.
They should. I don't think they do. I'm 85%. I'm giving you for sure. I'm giving you the right answer on that.
Spirits is real. It's like this.
But I wish they would put nutrition labeling on wine. It would make everybody's life a lot easier.
Salads are.
Casper,
Yeah.
there's a distributor named Kermit Lynch who has been considered sort of the anti-Parker. And I've found a lot of his wines are really good, although he sort of goes for the more organic style and simpler wines. So what do you think of Kermit Lynch's wine?
Great. That's something I'm probably going to add that to future generations of this class. There's some distributors that you can have a lot of faith in, and I've never had a bad. If Kermit Lynch, for you, those of you that are as a distributor, in order to bring wines into the States, you need a distributor. And he's very fussy, or the company is very fussy about the wines that they bring in. So if you see Kermit Lynch on the label, it's going to be a good bottle of wine more than likely, because they're very, very picky and very fussy about the wines that they bring in. That's a great point.
Jasper, what are others that you would recommend for that as well?
For distributors, I'm not.
Yeah.
So I'm not super big on, I don't know a lot of the, other than Kermit Lynch, I don't know a lot of the distributors. They used to do a thing at Total Wine, and he's retired, and still some of his wine. There's these Alberto Marconi wines you might see. He's sort of a wine buyer, and his stuff was generally really, really good. I wish I had a better answer for you on that. I don't.
I'm not remembering last name. First name is Neil. I think he's a specialty in Burgundy. Anybody remember him? No.
What's the name again? I barely heard you.
His first name is Neil, and I can't remember his last name. He specializes in Burgundies. It's out of New York City.
I'm not familiar with him. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Any other questions or anything? Anybody get anything out of this? Or I thought when I set it up, I thought August would be a little slower month, so I would do something a little more educational than fun. So
Jasper, I really enjoyed the tasting. It was very different from the others, and gave us a lot to think about.
Yeah, just there's some basic things I think if you know, you can enjoy wine a lot more. You can get a lot more out of it. It shouldn't be all that complicated. Okay. Well, thank y'all. And hopefully we'll see you for the Bordeaux tasting.
Thank you.
Take care.
Can't make Bordeaux.
No, you can't because you live in the United States.
No,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
no, that was, I will be in Willamette.
Oh, you are? Well,
Yes.
look, I'll send a note out. It takes me forever to write these up. I just got back from Willamette.
Yes, I wanted to pick your brain about that, about where I should go.
Pick away. If you have some questions, I can give you, like, if you got a second or two, I can give you some places to go to.
Sure.
Probably the best, coolest tasting room in Willamette is a place called Soder. It's up on a hill.
Soder.
They take you to a little side room and you drink wine. And the wine is really good. My favorite winery is a place called Ayub.
Ayub.
First time I was there, we were staying at a bed and breakfast. And I didn't know anything about Willamette wine, so I told the innkeeper, set me up at all your favorite places.
Okay.
So she set me up at Ayub. Laura and I drove up. It's a little ranch house with a little garage next to it.
How do you spell that?
Ayoub.
Okay.
You have to make an appointment at both of these places. You can't just pull up. Knock on the door, nobody answers. Like 5 minutes later, a guy drives up with a little bag, brown bag in his hand. And it's Mo Ayub, the owner. He opens up the door. We go sit in his kitchen. He pulls out the wine. You look out his back. It's just a very modest ranch house. You look out the back window, back door, and you see some of his wineries. We tasted the wines. They were amazing. Laura even liked them where she had banned me from joining any more wine clubs, but she allowed me to join that one. I go home and I get the next issue of Wine Spectator talks about Oregon Pinots.
Yeah.
And there was a 1-page glossy picture of a Mo Ayub wine sitting in Wine Spectator. So we're still a member of that. Even his entry level stuff is really, really, really good. So that's a little more than you probably wanted to know, but try to make an appointment there.
Mm-hmm.
We just went, well, we hit a lot of higher, there's a place called Shea where a lot of people source their grapes from Shea. About 30% of the wines that they grow, they bottle themselves, and it's really good stuff. SHEA, I think. I'm a horrible.
Okay.
Why it takes me so long to put all my stuff together. Go there. There's an archery summit. If you want to go to the places that go to Domaine Druhan or Domaine Serene.
Sure.
They're French people that set up shop in Willamette. Where's some of my other favorites? There's oh yeah, if you want some of the best deals, amazing wines at really reasonable prices, is a place called Colleen Clements.
Okay.
I made a mistake and I can't figure out how to get it.
Go to Colleen Clements. It's a beautiful tasting room. You sit out in back. You're up on a hill, and the wines are really for Willamette. They're really reasonable.
Okay.
Great prices. If you like Riesling, there's a place called Tristatum
He's telling me that when I keep trying to change
that
it.
makes good Rieslings in Willamette, which I was kind of surprised about.
The person I'm vacationing with loves Riesling, so
Yeah.
writing that one down, definitely.
And then they don't do it at the farm anymore. I don't know if you said, we had the Big Table farm tasting, I think last January or February, where the owner of Big Table, I love Big Table Farms.
I don't
He
know.
used to love it.
I don't have it.
They used to have the tasting at the actual farm, but they opened the tasting room, but they're still really good too. I would try them as well. So that gives you a few places to go
Oh,
to.
goodness, yes. That's good. Thank you so much.
All right, that's what it is.
Any other questions?
I actually have a totally unrelated question. What is it in wines? Like one of the wines we're drinking tonight, I feel an allergic reaction to it. I'm getting congested. Is there a certain element in wine that does that?
There might be, because grapes grow in nature. There's bees, there's bugs, and it's a farm product. The wine is, people that grow wine are farmers. And a lot of times there's like histamines or something that's in the air or something that's what I've heard. Now, I'm 62% sure I'm giving you a good answer on that, but what I've heard is histamines and that sort of thing that naturally occur in nature that do that to you.
Okay, so it's a crapshoot.
A lot of people talk about sulfites in wines, and most of your better wines, like your $2 chucks, may have a lot of sulfites in them to get the flavor and balance. But most of your better wines, you'll get less sulfites in a glass of red wine than you will in a glass of orange juice. And I think sulfites are made to be a little bigger problem than they actually are. But what I've read is it's often the histamines or some of the stuff that occur naturally
In fruit.
that cause that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions?
Is your PayPal the same as your Zelle? I screwed up on your Zelle and I can't unscrew it, so.
Yeah, it's gasperthewinguy@gmail.com.
Okay, fine. They don't let you edit, and I got you Gasper the wine guy.
Oh, okay. Well, you could always probably add another one.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't let me add another one.
Oh, okay.
All right, so I'll do it pen pal. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is great.
Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Any other questions or thoughts or anything? My next appointment's not till 9 tomorrow
Bye,
morning.
Bonnie.
So I've got hours. Okay.
Thank
Sis,
you, Gasper.
all the New
Bye.
Jersey people, stay safe from the hurricane. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
See you guys tomorrow.
Take care.
The $2 truck store. You don't know about truck experience. No.
Everybody signing out?
Mhm.
Yes.